There is a moment, a very specific, very quiet, very private moment that happens inside a man's heart when the woman he has been taking for granted finally begins to pull away. It does not happen with a crash. It does not happen with a dramatic confrontation. It does not happen the way the movies show it, with rain and running and breathless declarations at airport gates. No, it happens in the stillness. It happens in the space between her last sentence and his silence. It happens the morning he reaches for the phone to call her and then stops himself because he suddenly, truly, deeply understands that she may not answer anymore, that she may have finally decided she is done, that she may have finally chosen herself. And in that moment, that terrifying, shattering, soul-rearranging moment, something breaks open inside him. Something he buried under years of pride and indifference and comfortable assumptions. Something he told himself he didn't need to say. Something he convinced himself she already knew. And he speaks. And what he says in that moment, those 5 specific things, those 5 expressions that only leave a man's lips when he truly realizes he is about to lose a woman of your caliber, are unlike anything he has ever said before. They are raw. They are real. They are the truest words he has ever spoken. And today, on the Heart Compass, we are going to walk through every single one of them, because you deserve to understand what those words mean. You deserve to understand what they reveal about him. You deserve to understand what they reveal about you. And most importantly, you deserve to understand what you should do and what you should not do when you hear them. If you are a woman over 65 who has loved deeply, who has given generously, who has waited patiently, and who is now standing at a crossroads, wondering whether what you have is real or whether the best is behind you, this video is for you. Stay with me. Every word of what follows matters. Welcome, beautiful soul, to the Heart Compass, the channel that is dedicated entirely to you, to the woman who has lived fully, to the woman who has loved completely, to the woman who has survived heartbreak and loneliness and disappointment and the long, quiet ache of being misunderstood, and who has come out on the other side not bitter but wiser, not closed but more discerning, not defeated but magnificently, irreversibly, undeniably stronger. If this is your first time joining us here at the Heart Compass, welcome home. This is a space built for you, a space where your experiences are honored, a space where your age is not a limitation but a superpower, a space where we talk about love, relationships, self-worth, and emotional intelligence with the depth and seriousness that they deserve. Because you, at this stage of your life, deserve nothing less. And if you have been with us for a while, if you are one of our beloved regular viewers, then you already know that what we do here is different. We do not traffic in shallow advice. We do not give you lists that reduce the complexity of human relationships to cute little bullet points. We sit with you. We go deep with you. We explore the full, complicated, beautiful landscape of what it means to love and be loved as a woman of experience, wisdom, and extraordinary depth. Before we begin today's journey together, I want to ask something of you, because this community, this channel, this space we have built together, it only grows and reaches more women like you through your support and your voice. So if what we discuss today moves you, if it opens something in you, if it helps you see yourself or your relationships more clearly, please take just a moment to hit that like button. It costs you nothing and it means everything to us. If you have thoughts, if you have questions, if you have a story from your own life that connects to what we discussed today, please share it in the comments below. Your words matter. Your story matters. And you may not know this, but when you share your experience in the comments, you become a lifeline for another woman somewhere in the world who is going through exactly what you went through, and who desperately needs to know she is not alone. Share this video with a woman you love, with a sister, with a friend, with a daughter or a niece who is navigating love and wondering if she is asking for too much. Because the truth we share here is a gift, and gifts are meant to be passed along. And please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the Heart Compass and ring that notification bell so that you never miss a moment of what we create together here. We are building something special, and you belong in the center of it. And finally, for those of you who want to go above and beyond in supporting this channel, you please consider showing your appreciation through Super Thanks. Your generosity directly supports the creation of content like this, content that takes hours and hours of care and thought and love to produce. And it allows us to keep going, keep growing, and keep showing up for you. Now, let us begin. Let us talk about you, about the kind of woman you are, about the kind of love you have carried in your lifetime, and about the 5 words that a man only says, truly, genuinely says, when he finally wakes up to the terrifying reality that he is about to lose you. Part 1. Understanding the woman you are. Before we get to the 5 words, we need to spend real time understanding who we are talking about. Because not every woman hears these words. Not every woman inspires them. These are not words that fall easily from a man's lips under ordinary circumstances. They are not words that a man speaks because he is comfortable. They are not words that a man speaks because he is relaxed and satisfied and certain of the future. These are words that come from a very specific kind of reckoning. A reckoning that is only triggered by a very specific kind of woman. And that woman is you. So let us understand who you are. You are a woman who has been alive for over 6.5 decades. Think about what that means for a moment. Think about what 65 or 70 or 75 years of living actually contains. It contains decades of waking up and showing up regardless of how you felt. It contains losses that would have broken someone who hadn't built what you've built inside yourself. It contains loves that changed you, relationships that shaped you, heartbreaks that taught you things no classroom ever could. It contains the raising of children, perhaps, or the choosing not to, the building of careers or the sacrificing of them, the putting of others first, again and again and again. You have been through the dissolution of dreams and the surprising emergence of new ones. You have stood at graves and in hospital rooms and at the edge of your own life looking down into the dark. And you have risen, not perfectly, not without scars, but you have risen. There is a quality that develops in a woman who has lived this way. It is not something that can be faked or performed or acquired through reading. It is earned. It is the quality of depth. When you walk into a room, there is something behind your eyes that younger women, through no fault of their own, simply do not yet possess. It is the knowledge that comes from having truly lived, the peace that comes from having truly suffered and survived, the grace that comes from having truly loved and lost and loved again. Men feel this quality. They may not be able to name it. They may not even consciously recognize it, but they feel it. There is an emotional gravity that a woman like you carries, a kind of magnificent, quiet, unshakable centeredness. And men are drawn to it the way ships are drawn to lighthouses, not because you are trying to attract them, but because you are genuinely, authentically yourself, because you have stopped performing, because you have nothing left to prove and no patience for pretense. You have, over the course of your life, developed a relationship with yourself that most people never achieve. You know who you are. You know what you will and will not tolerate. You know the difference between love and loneliness. You know the difference between companionship and genuine connection. You know, in your bones, in your gut, in the deep, quiet places of your soul, what you deserve, and you are no longer willing to accept less. This is what makes you rare. This is what makes you remarkable, and this precise combination of warmth and wisdom, of love and limits, of availability and self-respect, is exactly what makes you the kind of woman whose potential absence will bring a man to his knees. Not because you are trying to manipulate him, not because you are playing games, but because you are genuinely, authentically, fully yourself. And men, real men, men who have even a fragment of emotional intelligence, feel the difference between a woman who tolerates them and a woman who chooses them, between a woman who has no alternatives and a woman who has no need to prove herself, between a woman who is staying out of habit and a woman who is staying out of genuine, clear-eyed choice. When that woman, you, begins to withdraw her presence, begins to redirect her energy, begins to quietly and without drama or ultimatum, simply begin to let go, the man who has been taking her for granted suddenly understands, with a clarity that shocks him, exactly what he is losing. And that is when he speaks. That is when those 5 phrases, those 5 specific confessions, fall from his lips like something released from a place he didn't know existed inside him. The part 2, why men take women like you for granted, and why that changes. Before we get into the 5 phrases themselves, we need to understand something crucial about how this situation develops, because it does not happen all at once. It is not sudden. It is a slow erosion, a gradual drift, a quiet accumulation of small moments that build over time into something that feels very much like being unseen. Men, especially men of a certain generation, the same generation you have loved and lived alongside, were not typically raised to understand or articulate emotional complexity. They were raised to provide, to protect, to perform. They were told in 1,000 explicit and implicit ways that their worth was in what they did, not in what they felt. That feelings were a weakness to be contained. That needing someone was a vulnerability to be hidden. And so they learned to take things for granted, not out of cruelty, not out of contempt, but out of a kind of emotional blindness that was trained into them before they had any say in the matter. They learned to assume that love, once established, did not need maintenance, that a woman who stayed was a woman who was satisfied, that the absence of complaint was the same as the presence of contentment. They learned, in other words, to stop looking at you, not in the physical sense, but in the deepest, most important sense. They stopped noticing your efforts. They stopped being curious about your inner life. They stopped asking questions about what you were feeling, what you were needing, what you were dreaming about. They became comfortable, and comfort without consciousness, it becomes complacency. And complacency without awareness becomes a kind of quiet, careless abandonment, even from within the relationship. And you, because you are who you are, because you are generous, because you are patient, because you were also raised to put others first and to manage your needs quietly and without causing disruption, you absorbed that abandonment. You kept showing up. You kept pouring love into the relationship. You kept making things warm and beautiful and functional. You kept being extraordinary, but something was changing inside you, slowly, so slowly that perhaps you didn't even fully name it for a long time. A door was closing. A light was dimming, not in anger, not in resentment, just in a quiet, dignified, inexorable recognition. This is not enough. I am not seen here. I am not fully known here. And I deserve to be. And then, either because you made a conscious choice, or because your soul simply reached its natural limit, you began to withdraw. Not dramatically, not with declarations or tantrums or scenes. You began very quietly to take yourself back, to invest your energy inward, to stop overextending towards someone who had long since stopped leaning in to meet you. Maybe you started saying no more often. Maybe you stopped initiating as frequently. Maybe you found yourself less available, not as a strategy, not as a game, but because you genuinely began to reclaim your own time, your own company, your own inner world. Maybe you stopped filling the silences. Maybe you stopped going out of your way. Maybe you simply, finally, began to take care of yourself with the same devotion you had always extended to everyone else. And then he noticed. Not at first. At first, he barely registered it. He was too comfortable, too accustomed to your presence and your warmth being simply there, always available, always forthcoming. He barely noticed the slight shift in temperature, but then it became undeniable. There was a coolness now where there had always been warmth, a space where there had always been closeness, a quietness where there had always been the reassuring sound of your presence filling the room. And as that reality crystallized, and he began to truly understand that what was changing was not a mood or a bad day, but a fundamental shift in your orientation toward him. Something happened inside him that he had never experienced before. He felt it, the weight of losing you, the actual, terrible, specific gravity of what your absence would mean. And he spoke. The first phrase, "I don't want to lose you." The first phrase that a man speaks when he truly realizes he is losing a woman like you is perhaps the simplest and yet the most profound of all five. It is this: "I don't want to lose you." 4 words, 1 contraction, and underneath them, an entire ocean. When a man says, "I don't want to lose you," not casually, not as a throwaway line, but in that particular tone, at that particular moment, with that particular heaviness, he is saying something that for many men of his generation is nothing short of extraordinary. He is admitting need. He is admitting vulnerability. He is admitting that his well-being is connected to your presence in a way that he cannot simply manage or override or shrug off. For a man who was raised to project strength, to maintain control, to never show what he needs, this is an enormous admission. But let us be careful here. Let us not simply hear the surface of those words and flood ourselves with hope and relief. Let us look deeper. Let us ask the questions that a woman of your wisdom has every right to ask. When he says, "I don't want to lose you," what does that actually mean? What is he afraid of losing? This is a critical question, and the answer reveals everything about whether what he is expressing is genuine love or merely the panic of comfort disappearing. A man who says, "I don't want to lose you," from a place of genuine love is saying, "I do not want to lose the specific and irreplaceable person that you are. I do not want to lose the way your mind works, the way your laugh sounds, the way the world feels different and richer and more navigable when you are in it. I do not want to lose the person who knows me, who has seen my worst and stayed, who has heard my silence and understood it, who has loved me not for what I perform, but for who I actually am when no one is watching." That is one kind of "I don't want to lose you," and it is real, and it is meaningful, and it deserves to be heard with an open heart. But there is another kind. There is the "I don't want to lose you" that is really saying, "I do not want to lose the convenience you provide. I do not want to lose the emotional labor you contribute to my life. I do not want to lose the warmth and the comfort and the domestic ease that you have always created without complaint. I do not want to have to feel the discomfort of your absence. I do not want to have to do the work of replacing what you have given so freely." This second kind is not love. It is dependency dressed up as love. And a woman of your wisdom knows the difference, even when her heart wants to believe the first. How do you tell the difference? You listen not just to his words, but to what follows them. A man who genuinely does not want to lose you, who is afraid of losing you as a person, as an individual, as someone irreplaceable, will follow those words with action. He will ask what he did wrong. He will ask what you need. He will change his behavior not as a performance, but as a genuine recalibration. He will start to show up differently, with more attention, more presence, more awareness of your inner world. Now, a man who is simply afraid of losing his comfort source will say, "I don't want to lose you," and then wait. He will wait for you to be reassured. He will wait for things to go back to how they were. He will not change anything because the whole point of what he said was to stop the change, not to initiate more of it. Watch closely. What follows those 4 words is the real message. And here is what I want you to hold in your heart as you listen to him say them. You are not obligated to reassure him immediately. You are not obligated to soften the moment. You are not obligated to rush back in and close the space that you opened. That space that was necessary. That space that your soul needed. That space that taught him something true about what it would mean to exist without you. You can sit with those words. You can receive them. You can let them land. And then you can ask quietly, with all the dignity of a woman who knows her own worth, what are you going to do about that? Because the answer, or the absence of one, will tell you everything you need to know. The phrase, "I don't want to lose you," is the beginning of a man's awakening. But an awakening is only as real as the changes it produces. And you, my love, have spent enough of your life accepting words in the place of actions. You know the difference. And you will not be fooled by eloquence that is not backed by transformation. But if his words are backed by action, if he is truly waking up, truly seeing, and truly beginning to understand what you are and what you mean, and what it would cost him to live in a world without you in it, then perhaps those 4 words are the first note of a song that has been waiting a very long time to be sung. Listen carefully. You will know which kind this is. You always know. The second phrase, "I was wrong about everything." The second phrase is rarer. It is harder to produce. It requires something that does not come easily to many men, particularly men who have spent decades building an identity around being right, around having the answers, around being the one who holds steady and knows the way. It requires the total collapse of ego. I was wrong about everything. Not I was wrong about that one specific thing. Not I could have handled that better. Not I see now that you had a point. Those are the small concessions of a man who is still trying to maintain his narrative of himself as fundamentally right, who is simply making a tactical admission to win back the peace. I was wrong about everything is something different entirely. When a man says those words, when he truly means them, when they come from the deep, aching, humbled place inside him, rather than from strategic calculation, he is doing something seismic. He is dismantling his entire story about the relationship and replacing it with yours. Think about what that means. For years, perhaps for decades, he has been carrying a version of events in which he was reasonable, in which his behavior was justified, in which your unhappiness was a kind of excess emotionality that he was patiently tolerating rather than something that was actually, legitimately, fully warranted. He has been holding on to a narrative in which he was doing enough, in which he was being enough, in which the relationship was fine because it continued to function. And now that narrative has shattered. I was wrong about everything means I was wrong to think that continuing to show up physically was the same as being emotionally present. I was wrong to think that my silence was neutral rather than harmful. I was wrong to think that your patience was inexhaustible. I was wrong to think that your love for me was not affected by how rarely I showed you that I valued it. I was wrong to think that what we had was secure just because it hadn't ended yet. I was wrong to think that you would always be here, and that my failure to truly see you and honor you and choose you actively, every day, not just at the beginning, was not costing both of us something irreplaceable. That is what lives inside "I was wrong about everything." And it is important for you to understand why this phrase is one of the 5 that a man only speaks when he is genuinely afraid of losing you. Because you do not say, "I was wrong about everything," when you are comfortable. You do not say it when you still feel in control. You do not say it when you believe there is still plenty of time. You say it when the ground has shifted beneath you so completely that you finally understand that the story you have been telling yourself was a lie. That the version of events you have been living inside was not accurate. That the woman standing before you, or the woman who is quietly, painfully, gracefully beginning to drift away from you, was always seeing something clearly that you refused to see. She was always right, and you were always wrong. And the devastation of that recognition, the sheer, humbling, disorienting weight of it, is what produces those 4 words. Now, how should you receive them? This is where your wisdom matters more than anything, because there are 2 ways to receive "I was wrong about everything." There is the way of the wounded heart, the part of you that has waited so long, suffered so much, ached so deeply for this kind of acknowledgement that wants to throw herself into his arms immediately and accept this as the resolution, the conclusion, the happy ending to a long and painful story. And there is the way of the wise woman, the part of you that has learned through hard experience that admission is the beginning of change, not the completion of it. The part of you that knows that a man can be genuinely, sincerely wrong in this moment and still, if nothing structurally changes, return to the same patterns within weeks or months. Not out of deception, but out of the simple, sad reality that insight without sustained action does not produce transformation. The wise woman receives "I was wrong about everything" with compassion and with clarity. She says, either aloud or simply within herself, "I hear you, and I believe that you mean this, and I am glad, genuinely, deeply glad, that you have arrived at this understanding. Now show me. Show me with every day that follows. Show me in the small moments when it would be easier to fall back into old patterns. Show me when you are tired or stressed or defensive. In those moments especially, show me. Because it is easy to be awake when the crisis is acute. The real test is whether the awakening holds. You have earned the right to require proof. Not as punishment, not as a power play, simply because you are a woman who has learned that words, no matter how sincere, are not the currency of love. Actions are, but do not dismiss those words either. Do not be so armored, so self-protective, so conditioned against hope that you cannot let them reach you. Because a man who says, "I was wrong about everything," and means it, is doing something genuinely remarkable. He is choosing honesty over comfort, humility over pride, truth over ego, and that, in itself, deserves to be acknowledged. There is a gift in this phrase. Not the gift of a solution, but the gift of a foundation. If he is willing to tear down his entire false narrative, then perhaps there is something real and new and beautiful that can be built in its place. But only if what follows is different. And you will know. You always know. The third phrase, "I need you." Now we come to the third phrase, and this one is perhaps the most complicated of all 5, because it sounds like love, it feels like love, and sometimes it is love, but sometimes it is something else entirely. And only a woman of extraordinary discernment can tell the difference. I need you. 2 words, one of the shortest phrases in the language, and one of the most loaded. When a man says, "I need you" to a woman like you, when those 2 simple words come out in that particular way, at that particular moment, the room changes, the air changes, Something softens and tightens simultaneously in your chest, because you have spent so long being the one who gives, the one who is needed, the one who pours herself out in service of others. And here is someone finally saying that they need you too. But let us slow down. Let us think about what "I need you" actually means, because the same two words can mean wildly different things depending on where they come from and what they are pointing toward. There is the "I need you" of love. This is the version where he is saying, "I need you specifically. I need your particular way of seeing the world. I need your humor, your wisdom, your specific, incomparable, utterly unrepeatable self. I need the way you make me think differently. I need the way you make me feel known. I need the version of myself that I become when I am genuinely connected to you. Without you, I am not less comfortable. I am less alive. I am less whole." That version of "I need you" is an expression of deep, genuine love. It is love as recognition, love as specificity, love as the understanding that you, this exact person, are not interchangeable, that there is no substitute, that what you bring to his life could not be replicated by someone else, however available, however charming, however convenient. And then there is the other version, where the "I need you" of dependency, the version that says, "I need you the way I need the heating to work, and the meals to be made, and the appointments to be kept, and the emotional temperature of my daily life to be managed so that I don't have to do it myself. I need you the way I need a system that functions. I need the infrastructure of a life with you in it, the comfort of your presence, the reliability of your care. I need what you do, not who you are. I want you to sit with those two versions for a moment, because you will hear both in your lifetime. Perhaps you have already heard both. And the difference between them is the difference between being cherished and being used, between being loved and being depended upon, between being seen as a person and being valued as a function. How do you tell them apart in the moment when he says it? Listen for what comes before and what comes after. A man who needs you as a person will follow "I need you" with specifics, not necessarily immediately. He may not be articulate, he may not have the emotional vocabulary to express it fluently, but eventually the specifics will come. He will tell you why. He will tell you what it is about you, precisely and specifically, that he cannot imagine living without. He will stumble over the words, perhaps, but the attempt to be specific, to be precise, to truly articulate your particular irreplaceability, that attempt will be there. A man who needs you as a function will not go to specifics. He will not be able to articulate what is unique and irreplaceable about you, because in his version of things, you are not unique and irreplaceable. You are necessary. There is a difference. You can replace a function. You cannot replace a person. Now, here is what I want you to understand about "I need you," even in its purest, most genuine form. Need is not the same as love, and love, real, sustainable, reciprocal love, must be built on more than need. You have spent much of your life being needed. You have been needed by children, by aging parents, by friends in crisis, by partners who leaned heavily on your strength and your steadiness and your generosity, and you have given abundantly without complaint, and there is great beauty in that. The capacity to be needed and to respond to need with grace is one of the most remarkable things about a woman like you. But here is what I know about you now, at this stage of your life. You do not just want to be needed. You want to be desired. You want to be chosen. You want someone who is not with you because he cannot manage without you, but because he genuinely, actively, joyfully wants you in his life. You want someone who would still choose you even if he could manage perfectly well without you. Someone who chooses you not out of need, but out of recognition. recognition that his life is simply, unmistakably, undeniably better with you in it. That is the standard you deserve. Not because you are demanding, but because you are wise enough to know the difference between need and love, between dependency and devotion, between a man who cannot do without you and a man who would not want to. When he says, "I need you," and the panic is real and the emotion is genuine, receive it with compassion. It is real. It matters. But follow up. Ask, "What do you need from me?" And then listen. The answer will tell you whether what he needs is you or what you provide, whether he sees a person or a function, whether this is the beginning of a real conversation or simply an attempt to stabilize what he fears losing. You are allowed to be moved by "I need you." It is human, it is natural, it may even be beautiful if it is the right kind, but you are also a woman who knows that being needed is not the same as being loved, and you will settle for nothing less than love. The fourth phrase, "You're the only woman who ever truly understood me." The fourth phrase is different in character from the first three. It is quieter. It comes from a deeper, older place. And when it is sincere, which it often is, because men of this generation rarely speak this way without meaning it, it carries a weight that is almost unbearable. "You're the only woman who ever truly understood me." Let that sentence settle, because what a man is saying when he says this, when he says it in that low, stunned, almost disbelieving voice that a man gets when he is saying something that surprises him even as it comes out of his mouth, is that you have done something extraordinarily rare, something that in his entire lifetime of relationships and connections and intimacies has never quite happened before. You have seen him, not the version of himself he presents to the world, not the capable, competent, managed persona he has constructed over decades of masculine performance, the real one, the complicated, uncertain, sometimes frightened, sometimes lonely, sometimes deeply sad, and sometimes quietly joyful real one, the man behind the role, the person behind the function, the soul behind the silence. You saw him, and you did not run, and you did not fix him. You did not tell him what to feel or how to be. You simply, with the extraordinary grace of a woman who has truly loved and truly lived, held space for him to exist exactly as he was. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Do you have any idea how few people in any given life truly hold that kind of space? How few people love without agenda, without correction, without the constant low-level pressure to be different, to be better, to be more or less or other than what one is. You did that for him. And even if he did not say so at the time, even if he took it entirely for granted, even if he barely noticed it, even if he moved through your love like a man moving through fresh air without stopping to think about the miracle of breathing, it changed him. It marked him. It left an imprint in him that nothing and no one can erase. And now that you are pulling away, now that the warmth of your understanding is withdrawing, now that the extraordinary gift of being truly seen is no longer freely available to him, he is beginning to understand what he had. He is beginning to understand that what you gave him was not ordinary, that most people go through their entire lives without experiencing it, that he was, in this regard, extraordinarily lucky, and that his luck may have run out. "You're the only woman who ever truly understood me" is, in its own way, the most loving of all 5 phrases, because it is not about what you do for him. It is about who you are to him. It is about the quality of your attention, the depth of your presence, the authenticity of your engagement with his inner world. It is about you, specifically and irreplaceably you. And I want you to hear that. I want you to take that in, because here is something I suspect about you. I suspect that in all the years you were seeing him, truly seeing him, holding space for him, understanding him in the way that very few people ever get to be understood. I suspect that you were not always equally seen in return. I suspect that your inner world did not always receive the same quality of attention that you gave. I suspect that you understood him more deeply than he understood you, and that there was a loneliness in that. The particular loneliness of the one who sees more than they are seen. And so when he says, "You're the only woman who ever truly understood me," I want you to ask yourself gently and honestly, do you feel equally understood by him? Does he know your depths the way you know his? Has he sat with your complexity the way you have sat with his? Has he held space for your fears, your dreams, your doubts, your private joys, the things you have never told anyone else? Because understanding, true understanding, is not supposed to be a one-way street. And a woman like you deserves to be as thoroughly, as carefully, as lovingly understood as she has always been willing to understand others. If his answer to, "You're the only woman who truly understood me," is not accompanied by a genuine desire to reverse the equation, to turn his attention toward you, to ask the questions he has never asked, to become curious about your inner world with the same passion that you have always brought to his, then those words, beautiful as they are, remain incomplete, because here is the truth. You understood him brilliantly, generously, faithfully. Now the question is whether he is finally ready to understand you. That is the conversation that this phrase can open, if you are willing to have it. Not with accusation, not with resentment, but with the quiet, clear, dignified invitation of a woman who knows her worth. I have always tried to understand you. I would love for you to do the same for me. Are you ready for that? What he does with that question will tell you everything. The fifth phrase, "I'm sorry, I mean truly, deeply sorry." And now we come to the fifth phrase, the last one, and in many ways, the most powerful of all. "I'm sorry, I mean truly, deeply sorry." Now you have heard "I'm sorry" before. We have all heard "I'm sorry" many times in many forms. I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I'm sorry, can we please move on? These are the apologies of convenience, the apologies of management, the apologies designed to end a conversation rather than open one. They are not what we are talking about. What we are talking about is the apology that does not precede but. The apology that does not come with a justification attached. The apology that stands on its own, naked and undefended, without trying to share the blame or redirect the responsibility or soften the accountability. The apology that comes from a man who has stopped defending himself long enough to actually feel the weight of what he did and failed to do, to a woman who deserved better. I'm sorry, I mean truly, deeply sorry, is the apology that comes after a man has sat with the reality of your potential departure long enough to stop thinking about himself and start thinking about you. It is the apology that comes when he has asked himself, perhaps for the first time with genuine honesty, not "How does her leaving affect me?" but "How did I affect her? What did my behavior cost her? What did my inattention, my silence, my assumption that she would always be there, my failure to truly see her and honor her and cherish her, what did all of that cost this extraordinary woman who gave me so much of herself?" That shift from self-focused to other-focused is the most important emotional development that can happen inside a man in the context of a relationship. It is the shift from immature love to mature love, from taking to giving, from assuming to appreciating, from comfort to consciousness. And the apology that emerges from that shift is unlike any apology you have heard before. It is not about managing the relationship. It is not about getting things back to normal. It is about truly, finally reckoning with the impact of his behavior on you as a human being, on your inner life, on your sense of worth. on the ways that you had to work around his absence and his inattention and his assumption of your eternal availability. This apology is for you, not for him, not for the relationship, for you as a person, and that makes it extraordinary. But here is where we need to have the most important conversation of this entire video. The conversation about what to do when you hear these words. Because here you are. You are over 65. You are wise. You have been through enough in your life to know that sorry is one of the most frequently weaponized words in the language of love. You have probably seen, in your own life or in the lives of women you love, the cycle of apology and repetition, the I'm sorry that leads to a week of better behavior and then a slow, inevitable slide back into the old patterns. The I'm sorry that is used as a reset button rather than a genuine reckoning. The I'm sorry that expects forgiveness as its immediate reward and responds to any hesitation with hurt or impatience or even a new injury. You are right to be careful with apologies. You are right to require that they be backed by changed behavior. You are right to take your time. But I also want to say something to the part of you that is very, very tired. The part of you that has been vigilant for so long. The part of you that has protected yourself rightly because protection was necessary. The part of you that has become, perhaps without intending to, a little armored, a little closed, a little unable to trust that anything will be different this time because every other time something happened that convinced you it never is. I want to say to that part of you, you are allowed to hope. Not blindly, not naively, not in the way of a woman who ignores red flags because she cannot tolerate more disappointment, but in the way of a woman who is wise enough to know that people can change, that men can grow, that the same relationship can become a different and better one if both people are genuinely willing to do the work. You are allowed to receive a genuine apology with an open heart. You are allowed to let it matter to you. You are allowed to be moved. And then you are allowed to say, with love, with clarity, with the full dignity of a woman who knows exactly who she is, "Thank you for that. That means more to me than you know. And what I need now, more than anything, is to see that your actions begin to match your words. Not perfectly, not overnight, but steadily, consistently, with genuine effort. Because that is the bargain of real change. Not perfection, effort, not instant transformation, consistent direction, not the absence of all future mistakes. The presence of genuine accountability when mistakes happen. If he gives you that, if his sorry is followed by the slow, sustained, sometimes stumbling but never abandoned effort to be different, to be better, to truly reckon with who he has been and who he wants to become, then perhaps those two words are the beginning of the greatest love story of your later years. Not the beginning you always imagined, but the beginning you actually need. Part 3. What these 5 phrases reveal about you. Now that we have walked through all 5 phrases, I don't want to lose you. I was wrong about everything. I need you. You're the only woman who ever truly understood me, and I'm sorry. I mean truly, deeply sorry. I want to take a step back and talk about what the fact that you are hearing them reveals about you. Because these phrases are not random. They are not the kind of thing a man says to just anyone. They are the kind of thing a man says when he is confronted with the potential loss of someone genuinely, uncomplicatedly extraordinary. Think about what it takes to bring a man to this place. Not a performance, not a strategy, not games or manipulation or calculated withdrawal designed to trigger a specific response. All of that produces different reactions. Defensiveness, resentment, the kind of reactive pursuit that evaporates the moment the game stops. What produces these 5 phrases is something entirely different. It is the genuine, undeniable, impossible to fake quality of a woman who knows herself. A woman who loves fully but is not desperate. A woman who is warm but not bottomless. A woman who has limits that come not from rules but from values. A woman who does not need to win a fight. She simply needs to live her truth. And when living her truth means withdrawing from something that is not honoring her, she does it with grace and without drama, and that is what is most terrifying to a man who has taken her for granted. He cannot manipulate dignity. He cannot outlast self-respect. He cannot argue with a woman who is not arguing, who is simply quietly becoming more herself. And the more herself she becomes, the more he sees what he is actually losing, not just a warm body in his life, not just a function or a comfort or a convenience, but a whole, complex, luminous, irreplaceable human being. That is you. Every moment you have invested in your own growth, your own healing, your own understanding of who you are and what you deserve. Every book you have read, every conversation you have had with a dear friend that went deep into the truth, every quiet morning you have spent in your own company learning to be at peace with yourself, every time you have chosen your own dignity over the easier path of settling. All of that has made you who you are right now. And who you are right now is magnificent, not perfect. I am not talking about perfection. I am talking about authenticity. I am talking about the kind of woman who has stopped performing and started being. The kind of woman who does not say things she does not mean to spare feelings that have already been spared too many times at her own expense. The kind of woman who has outlasted her need for external validation and arrived at a place where her sense of worth comes from within. That woman, that specific, rare, extraordinary woman, is the kind of woman who makes men say things they have never said before. Because here is the truth about men and the women who inspire these kinds of phrases. A man does not wake up and have a revelation about an ordinary love. He does not panic and pour his heart out at the potential loss of someone he has always secretly known he could replace. He does not reach into the deepest, most defended part of himself and produce raw, unguarded honesty for someone who was just convenient. He does it for the woman whose presence genuinely elevated him, whose love genuinely changed him, whose loss would leave a gap so specific, so precise, so utterly irreplaceable that no amount of time or new company or comfortable distraction could ever fully fill it. That woman is you, and I want you to sit with that, not with arrogance, but with the quiet, solid, unshakable knowledge of your own value. You have always been valuable, even in the years when you were not told so, even in the relationships where you were not treated as such, even in the long stretches of loneliness where you began to wonder whether you were asking for too much. You were always valuable. You were always irreplaceable. You were always the kind of woman who deserved to be chosen, actively and deliberately, every single day. And now he is beginning to understand that. It may have taken him longer than it should have. It may have required the near loss of you to produce the clarity that gentler invitations could not. But he is beginning to understand. The question is what you do with that. Part 4. The question you must ask yourself. Before we talk about how to respond when you hear these 5 phrases, before we discuss strategy or decisions or what comes next, we need to talk about the most important question of all. And that question is not, can he change? Although that matters. And it is not, do I believe him? Although that matters too. The most important question is this: what do I want? Not what you should want. Not what would be practical or sensible, or what your children think, or what your friends advise. Not what would be the most forgiving response or the most self-protective one. What do you, in the deepest, most honest, most unguarded part of yourself, actually want? Because you are over 65. And while 65, 70, 75 are absolutely, unequivocally, not even close to the end of your story. They are also not a time for half measures. They are not a time for staying in something out of inertia, out of the fear of loneliness, out of the habit of a shared history, out of the sense that starting over is too daunting or that nothing better is possible. They are a time for clarity. What do you actually want your life to look like? What do you want your days to feel like? What do you want your emotional landscape to be? And is this man, the one who is now saying these things, the one who has finally been cracked open by the prospect of losing you, is he, honestly and realistically, capable of giving you that? Not capable in theory, not capable in his best moments, in the early stages of reconciliation, when everything is tender and sincere and suffused with the particular intensity of almost loss. Capable sustainably, capable in the ordinary Tuesday afternoons of life, capable in the months after the crisis has passed and the comfort has returned and the habits of a lifetime begin, as they always do, to reassert themselves. This is the real question, and it does not have an easy answer. There are women who will hear these 5 phrases and know absolutely and without doubt that this is the beginning of something genuinely new and better, who will feel in their bones that the man saying these things has truly changed, not just been frightened, but changed. And they will be right, and they will stay, and what they build in the remaining years of their lives together will be more real, more tender, a more mutually honoring than anything that came before. There are other women who will hear these phrases and recognize them as genuine and sincere, and still know with the same deep certainty that this is not enough, that the gap between what they need and what this man is capable of providing is simply too wide, that their peace, their joy, their sense of being fully seen and valued is better found in solitude or in a different kind of companionship than in a relationship that has required this much from them and returned this little. Both of those women would be right. Both would be making the correct decision for their specific circumstances. The only wrong answer is the one that comes not from your own deep knowing, but from fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of losing the familiar. Fear of what people will think. Fear of the practical complications of separation. Fear that you are too old for anything better. Fear that this is your last chance. None of those fears are good reasons to stay, and none of them are good reasons to leave either. The only good reason to stay is genuine desire, genuine love, genuine hope, genuine belief that what can be built is worth the continued investment of your precious, irreplaceable life. And the only good reason to leave is genuine knowledge, genuine recognition that your thriving requires something other than what this situation can provide. Both of those are acts of love. Love for yourself, yes, but also, in a very real sense, love for him. Because a woman who stays when she should leave does no one any favors. She simply teaches the man that his behavior is acceptable and teaches herself that her needs are secondary. And a woman who leaves when the leaving is the honest, aligned, true thing, she gives both of them the chance to find what they are actually meant for. You know the answer. It may take some quiet time, some time away from the noise and the emotion and the pressure of his need to hear it clearly. But you know. And when you find that knowing, trust it, honor it, act on it, because at this stage of your life, you have earned the right to live in alignment with your own truth. Part 5. The danger of settling and the beauty of holding your ground. I want to spend some time with something that I know lives in the hearts of many of you watching this video. Something that is very real and very understandable and very human, and that, if not brought into the light, can lead you quietly astray. It is the temptation to settle, not because you don't know better, you know better, you have known better for years, but because something happens when a man finally says the right words. when he finally sees you, finally acknowledges what he has been missing, finally opens up in the way you always wanted him to, something in you relaxes. Some vigilance that you have been maintaining, perhaps for a very long time, begins to soften. And in that softening, it becomes very easy to accept less than you need. Because here is the thing about these 5 phrases. They are real. I am not suggesting they are manipulative or insincere. In most cases, when a man says these things at the moment of potentially losing a woman like you, he means them absolutely, every word. But meaning them and sustaining them are 2 very different things. And the danger, the genuine danger for a woman of your heart and your hope and your enormous capacity for love is that you hear these words and feel the door of your heart open, and then you do what you have always done when someone you love has reached for you. You give. You give generously and without reservation. You give your time, your warmth, your energy, your patience, your tenderness. You give everything. And then 3 months later, or 6 months later, or a year later, you find yourself back in the same dynamic, back in the same pattern, back in the same quiet, grinding experience of doing most of the emotional labor, of being less fully seen than you need to be, of wondering whether you are asking for too much. That is settling. It is not dramatic settling. It is not the obvious kind that you can point to easily. It is the subtle kind, the settling that happens when hope is allowed to outrun discernment, when the longing for change is allowed to mistake sincerity for transformation. So how do you protect yourself from that? How do you hold your ground without becoming hard? How do you stay open without becoming naive? How do you receive his awakening with a genuinely open heart, while also maintaining the clarity and the standards that brought you to this place of power in the first place? This is the art that a woman of your wisdom is uniquely equipped to practice. You hold your ground not through rules or ultimatums, or the withdrawal of warmth as a disciplinary measure. You hold your ground through continued, consistent, daily attentiveness to your own experience. Through a commitment to naming what you feel when you feel it, not in accusation but in honest communication. Through the refusal to pretend that you are fine when you are not, and the insistence that your inner world matters and will be attended to. You hold your ground by continuing to invest in yourself, in your friendships, your interests, your growth, your joy, regardless of the state of the relationship. Not as a threat, not as a demonstration of independence for his benefit, but because your own wholeness is not negotiable, because you are not simply the complement to his story. You are the protagonist of your own. You hold your ground by staying connected to the part of you that began this journey of self-reclamation, the part of you that decided, however quietly, that you deserved better. That part of you is the truest, wisest, most loving part of you, and it must not be submerged again beneath the relief of feeling wanted. And you hold your ground by having the difficult conversations, not once, not at the beginning when everything is raw and open, but ongoing as the relationship reestablishes itself. You hold your ground by continuing to say what you need, by continuing to name what is not working, by continuing to require that you be genuinely, consistently, daily chosen, not just in the heat of a crisis, but in the ordinary, unremarkable, magnificent routine of a real and loving life. That is how you receive his awakening without losing your own. That is how you allow something new to be built, without rebuilding the old thing that didn't work. That is how a woman of your experience and wisdom and extraordinary depth navigates the moment when a man finally begins to see her. Part 6. What happens after and how to build something real? If you have heard these 5 phrases and you have looked at your own heart and asked the right questions, and the answer that has come back is yes. Yes, this is worth continuing. Yes, this man is genuinely beginning to change. Yes, I want to see where this can go. then what comes next matters enormously, because the period immediately following a man's awakening is both the most hopeful and the most vulnerable time in a relationship. It is hopeful because the space of genuine feeling has been opened, because walls have come down, because things have been said that cannot be unsaid, and some of those things needed to be said very badly. And the saying of them has created a new kind of intimacy, a new kind of honesty, a new foundation that was not there before. But it is also vulnerable, because both of you are now operating without the familiar armor, because the old dynamic, the one you both knew so well, the one that was unsatisfying but at least predictable, has been disrupted, and in its place is something unformed, something that could become extraordinary or could collapse back into the old pattern, depending on how both of you choose to inhabit this new space. What does the woman do in this space? First, she does not rush to fill it. One of the most common and most understandable things that women do in the aftermath of a powerful emotional opening, the kind of opening that these 5 phrases represent, is rush to make everything comfortable again, to smooth things over, to reduce the tension, to return to a version of normalcy that feels safe and familiar. This is a loving impulse, but it can work against you, because the discomfort of this space, the uncertainty, the vulnerability, the rawness, is actually doing important work. It is keeping both of you honest. It is preventing the premature closure that would allow old patterns to reestablish themselves before new ones have had a chance to form. Let the discomfort work. Be comfortable with the conversation that is still happening. Don't rush to the resolution. Second, she communicates. Clearly, kindly, without aggression, without accusation, but clearly. She tells him what she needs, not as a demand, not as a test, but as a genuine sharing of her inner world with a man who has just declared himself ready to listen. She tells him what has been missing, what has hurt, what she has needed that she did not receive, and she does this not to punish him or to load him with guilt, but because genuine intimacy requires truth, and truth requires words. And a man who says, "I was wrong about everything, and you're the only woman who truly understood me," is implicitly saying, "I am ready to understand you better." Let him try. Third, she pays attention to his actions, yes. That is crucial, as we have discussed, but also to her own feelings. She stays attuned to her own experience. She notes when she feels genuinely honored, genuinely seen, genuinely cherished, and she notes when she does not. And she does not dismiss the latter. She brings it forward, gently, but without flinching. Fourth, she maintains her life, her friendships, her interests, her commitments to herself. She does not collapse into the relationship the way she might have done at 30 or 40, when the merging of lives felt like the ultimate proof of love. She knows better now. She knows that 2 whole people make a healthier relationship than 2 halves seeking completion in each other. She remains whole, and she requires him to do the same. And fifth, and this is perhaps the most important thing of all, she allows joy. She allows herself to receive his love, however imperfect and evolving and still in progress it is. She allows herself to feel the warmth of being wanted and seen and chosen. She does not hold herself in constant vigilance against disappointment, because that vigilance will prevent the very thing she is hoping for. She opens, not blindly, not recklessly, but genuinely, and she lets herself be loved, because this is what she has always deserved. Not a perfect man, a real one who sees her, who is trying, who has been cracked open by the honest reality of almost losing her and has come to the other side of that crack changed. That is love. Not the fairy tale version, the real one. Messy and uncertain and sometimes still getting it wrong, but fundamentally oriented toward her, fundamentally committed to seeing and honoring her. fundamentally awake to what she is. And that love, that real, earned, hard-won, deeply conscious love, is worth having. Part 7. The letter you never received. I want to do something a little different now. I want to read you the letter that you deserved to receive. Perhaps many years ago, perhaps just recently, perhaps not yet, but soon. The letter that contains, in its own way, the essence of all 5 phrases we have discussed. The letter that represents the full awakening of a man who finally, truly understands. This is not a real letter, but everything in it is true. To the woman I have been taking for granted. I have been awake for 3 hours now. I couldn't sleep. I keep going over things in my mind, things I should have said years ago, things I was too proud or too oblivious or too wrapped up in my own small concerns to say. And I've realized that the reason I couldn't sleep is not because I'm afraid of losing what you provide for me, although I am afraid of that too, and I'm not proud of that fact. The real reason I couldn't sleep is because I am afraid of losing you. You, specifically. The way you listen. The way you find what is interesting in everything. The way you have never once in all our time together made me feel stupid for not knowing something. The way you get quiet when something matters deeply to you. The way you laugh. The way you remember everything. Every conversation. Every small thing I mentioned once in passing that mattered to me, and you hold it carefully like it is precious, because to you it is. I have not done the same for you, and I need you to know that I know that. Not because you've told me, although you have, and I dismissed it, and I'm sorry for that, but because I've watched you. I've watched you work harder in every corner of our life together than I have ever worked. I've watched you ask for so little while giving so much. I've watched you withdraw, slowly, quietly, with so much more dignity than I deserved. And I told myself it was a mood, a phase, something that would pass. It wasn't a mood. It was you finally reaching your limit. And I was too comfortable, too complacent, too certain that you would always be there, because you always had been, to understand what that limit actually meant. I was wrong about everything. Not just the specific arguments, not just the specific failures, but about the whole way I understood our relationship. I thought that staying was the same as choosing. I thought that not leaving was the same as being present. I thought that the relationship was working because it continued. I never stopped to ask whether it was working for you. I need you. And I know how that sounds. I know you've probably been needed your whole life by everyone who wanted something from you. And I know that I need you can sound like just another demand placed on that extraordinary generosity of yours. But that's not what I mean. I mean, I need you the way I need to feel that my life is worth the living. I mean, I need your particular light. I mean, the world is a smaller, colder, less interesting, less knowable place without you in it. And you are the only woman who ever truly understood me. I don't say that to flatter you. I say it because it is simply, starkly, absolutely true. You understood the parts of me I never showed anyone. You understood them without requiring me to explain them, without judging them, without asking me to be different. You just understood. And I let that extraordinary gift become ordinary to me. I let it become background. I stopped seeing it. I see it now. I am sorry. I'm not the sorry that wants something from you, not the sorry that expects to be immediately forgiven and immediately followed by a return to normal. Just the sorry that looks you in the eyes and says, what I did and failed to do was not worthy of you. You deserved more, you deserved better, and I am going to spend whatever time remains between us, whether that is the rest of our lives or just these final weeks, trying to be the person who was always worthy of your love. You don't owe me a second chance. You don't owe me forgiveness. You don't owe me anything, but I hope you stay, not because I need you to, but because I genuinely believe, that what I can become with you is the best version of me that has ever existed. And I think you deserve to have someone in your life who is truly, consciously, joyfully trying to be that. I see you. Finally, truly, I see you. That letter exists in the hearts of men who have come to the edge of losing women like you and looked over. It may never be written on paper. It may never be spoken in quite those words, but it lives there, in the silence after he says, I don't want to lose you, in the shame and the grace of, I was wrong about everything, in the raw exposure of, I need you, in the wonder of, you're the only one who ever truly understood me, in the reckoning of, I'm sorry, truly, deeply sorry. It lives there, and now you know it. Part 8. For the woman who is alone and choosing herself. I want to pause here and speak directly to a different group among you, because not everyone watching this video is navigating these phrases within an existing relationship. Some of you have already left. Now, some of you are long past the relationship in question. Some of you have never heard these words, not from this man, and perhaps not from any man. And you are watching this video with a quiet ache in your chest that is about something deeper than the words themselves. It is about being seen. It is about the hunger. So old now, so familiar that you have almost stopped calling it a hunger. To be genuinely, thoroughly, reverently seen by someone who chooses to keep looking. I want to talk to you. First, I want to say this. The fact that you have not heard these words, or that the person who might have said them is no longer in your life, or that no one has yet arrived who is capable of saying them, none of that says anything about your worth. Nothing. Your value is not contingent on being recognized by a specific man, or any man, or anyone at all. Your value exists independently of whether it has been witnessed. But I also know that knowing that in your head and feeling it in your heart are two very different things, and that there is a loneliness that comes with not being seen, a particular heavy, sometimes crushing loneliness, that no amount of self-sufficiency or self-knowledge fully dissolves. You are allowed to want to be loved. You are allowed to grieve the love you did not receive. You are allowed to hold that longing without shame. And you are also, and this is perhaps the most important thing I will say in this entire video, allowed to believe that the best of your love story may still be ahead of you. Not because I am offering you cheap consolation, but because I have seen what happens when a woman over 65 has done the inner work you have done, has arrived at the knowing of herself, the acceptance of herself, the love of herself, and brings that fullness into a new connection. What happens is extraordinary. What happens is that the relationship she creates from that place is unlike anything she experienced at 30 or 40 or 50, because she is not bringing desperation. She is not bringing the unexamined wounds of her childhood, the inherited patterns of her mother's marriage, the frantic need to be chosen that drives so many younger women into the arms of men who are not right for them. She is bringing herself whole, clear, loving, discerning. And when a man meets a woman like that, a woman who is genuinely, authentically herself, who is not performing, who is not trying, who is simply the magnificent, specific, particular person she has become through a lifetime of living, he either recognizes something extraordinary or he doesn't. And if he doesn't, he is simply not the right man. And she, from that place of wholeness, has the resources to move on without being destroyed by the rejection. That is the gift of arriving at this place in your life. Not immunity from loneliness, not the guarantee of finding love, but the extraordinary resource of a self that is strong enough to hold the risk of loving again. You are not too old. You are not past it. You are not beyond the reach of a love that sees you clearly and chooses you fully. You are simply, magnificently, in possession of yourself. And that is the best possible foundation for anything that comes next. Keep yourself open, not desperately, not anxiously, just open. Available to the possibility that someone, somewhere, is on his own journey toward the kind of awakening we have been discussing today, and that when he gets there and when he looks up, he may find you, and recognize with the certainty of someone who has been lost for a very long time and has finally found what he was looking for, that you are exactly what a life of seeking has prepared him for. Part 9. The wisdom of your years. There is one more thing I want to say before we close. It is perhaps the most fundamental thing, and it is simply this. The wisdom you have accumulated over 65 or 70 or 75 years of living is not a consolation prize for aging. It is not the thing you get instead of the other things, instead of beauty, instead of options, instead of the future you imagined for yourself at 30. It is the best thing. It is the rarest, most valuable, most power-producing thing a human being can possess. And you have it. You have seen what love looks like when it works, and what it looks like when it doesn't. You have seen the long arcs of relationships, not just the beginnings, not just the honeymoon phases, not just the peak moments and the crisis points, but the long middle stretches where character is revealed and where the true nature of two people's commitment to each other becomes clear. You have seen what happens to people who stay in relationships that diminish them. You have seen what happens to people who leave too soon. You have seen what happens to people who arrive, finally, at a love that is genuine and mutual and sustaining, and what that kind of love does to the quality of every day, every hour, every moment of ordinary life. You have seen, in other words, what matters and what does not. This is not nothing. This is everything. The man who is smart enough, wise enough, humble enough, evolved enough to recognize that he is in the presence of a woman who possesses this kind of accumulated wisdom, and to treat that wisdom with the reverence it deserves, is the right man for you. Not the man who wants to compete with your knowledge, not the man who is threatened by your clarity, not the man who needs you to pretend to know less than you know so that he can feel comfortable. The man who looks at your fullness, your depth, your clarity, your hard-won knowing of yourself and of the world, and says, "This is extraordinary. I want to learn from this. I want to be the kind of man who is worthy of this." That man exists. He may be the man who is saying these 5 phrases right now. He may be someone you haven't yet met. But he exists, and he is looking, just as you are, for someone who has finally stopped pretending, who is finally and completely themselves. You are those things. You have always been those things. The years have simply stripped away everything that was not essentially you. And what remains is extraordinary. What remains is you. Summary and reflection. Before we say goodbye today, let us walk back through the 5 phrases one more time. Not because you need to memorize them, but because reviewing them together allows their full meaning to settle. The first phrase, "I don't want to lose you," is the moment of recognition, the moment when comfort becomes awareness, when assumption becomes understanding. It is the first crack in the armor of complacency, and what makes it meaningful is not the words themselves, but what follows them. Does he ask what has been missing? Does he begin to change? Or does he simply say the words and wait for the storm to pass? His answer to that question tells you everything. The second phrase, "I was wrong about everything," is the demolition of a false narrative. It is a man dismantling the story he told himself about your relationship, the story in which his behavior was reasonable and your unhappiness was excess, and replacing it with the truth. It is an act of extraordinary honesty. Now, and it deserves to be received with both compassion and discernment. It is a beginning, not an ending. The question is, what is built on this honest foundation? The third phrase, I need you, is the most loaded of the five, the most easily misread, the most requiring of careful attention. It must be distinguished from the need of dependency and the need of love. If he needs you as a person, your specific, irreplaceable, wholly unique self, that is love. If he needs what you do, what you provide, what your presence manages and maintains, that is dependency. You deserve to be loved, not managed, to be cherished, not depended upon. Listen for the difference. The fourth phrase, you're the only woman who ever truly understood me, is the recognition of your extraordinary gift for seeing others. And it is the invitation to a reciprocity that perhaps has never existed before. You have always understood him. The question is whether he is now ready, finally, to understand you, to ask the questions he has never asked, to listen with the quality of attention you have always brought to him. If he is, this phrase opens a door to a depth of mutual knowing that could be the most beautiful thing you have ever shared. The fifth phrase, I'm sorry, I mean truly, deeply sorry, is the full reckoning. The apology without a but, the admission without a justification, the recognition that his behavior had a real cost to a real person, you, and that this deserves to be acknowledged without deflection, without the minimizing of your pain, without the expectation of immediate forgiveness. This apology is for you, not for him. And if it is genuine, it is the foundation of something real. But as with all foundations, it requires that something be built upon it. Words must become actions. Actions must become patterns. Patterns must become the new character of the relationship. And underlying all five phrases, the thing that makes them possible, the thing that called them forth, is you. The woman who had the wisdom and the dignity to stop accepting less than she deserved, who began quietly and without drama to take herself back, who in doing so finally gave him the gift of understanding what he truly had. You are not responsible for his awakening, but you made it possible by being exactly, completely, unapologetically yourself. Closing thoughts. Your heart knows the way. We have traveled a long way together today. And I hope that somewhere in this journey, in the exploration of these five phrases, in the reflection on who you are and what you deserve, in the letter that lived in his heart even before it was spoken, in the conversation about what comes next, I hope somewhere in all of that you found something you needed. Whether it was the confirmation that you are not imagining things, that what you have been feeling, the sense of not being seen, the gradual withdrawal of your fullness from a situation that was not honoring it, was real and reasonable and right, or whether it was the permission to hope, to believe that the man who is saying these things right now is genuinely in the process of becoming something new, and that what you build together from this foundation can be more beautiful than anything that came before. Or whether it was simply the reminder, the clear, ringing, absolute reminder that you are magnificent, that your age is not a limitation on your love story, that what you have built inside yourself over 65 or 70 or 75 years of living is not a burden but a gift to yourself, to the people lucky enough to love you, and to the world. You are magnificent. Your heart is magnificent. Your story is not over. It may, in fact, be in one of its most important and most beautiful chapters right now. Trust yourself. Trust your knowing. Trust the deep, reliable, hard-won wisdom that has carried you through everything you have already been through. Your heart knows the way, and that beautiful soul is where we will close today's conversation on the Heart Compass. We have spent a lot of time together today, and I want you to know that I do not take that lightly. Your time is precious. Your attention is precious. And the fact that you gave both of them to this conversation means everything to me. because I create this content for you, not in the abstract. For you specifically, the extraordinary woman watching this right now. If something in today's video moved you, if something resonated, if something shifted, if something gave you a new way of seeing your situation or yourself, please let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, every one, and your words matter to me more than I can say. They remind me why I do this. They connect me to you in a real and meaningful way. They also, as I mentioned at the beginning, reach other women who are watching, women who may be sitting with the same questions you are sitting with, who may not yet have the words for what they are feeling, and who will find them in what you write. Your story is a gift. Share it. And if you haven't already, please take a moment right now to hit that like button. It is the simplest, most effortless way to tell us that this content matters to you, and it helps the Heart Compass reach more women like you who need to hear these conversations. It costs you nothing, and it gives us everything. Please subscribe to the Heart Compass if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you are always the first to know when a new video goes live. We are here every week with something new, something deep, something made with real love and real thought for a woman exactly like you. Share this video. Send it to a sister, a dear friend, a woman you love who is navigating something in her heart and needs a voice that honors her. This kind of content travels best through the hands of women who care about each other. Be that woman today. And for those of you who want to go beyond, who want to show your support for the work we do here in a way that truly makes a difference, please consider supporting the Heart Compass through Super Thanks. Your generosity is what makes it possible for us to keep showing up for you week after week with the depth and the care and the love that you deserve. Every Super Thanks is received with the deepest gratitude. You are not just supporting a channel, you are investing in a community, in a space where women like you are seen, honored, and celebrated. Your contribution makes all of that possible. And finally, to you, the woman who watched this entire video, who sat with these words and these ideas and these reflections, I want you to know something. You are seen here. You are honored here. You are loved here. Not perfectly, not completely. We are just a channel after all. Just a screen, just words and a voice. But genuinely, within the limits of what this can be, it is real. The care that goes into every video we make here is real. The belief in you, in your worth, your wisdom, your extraordinary, irreplaceable, specific self is real. Come back next week. We will be here. Until then, take care of your heart. It is the most important compass you have. This is the Heart Compass, and we will always, always be pointing you home to yourself.